AITA for calling my wife entitled and humiliating her in front of my mom? My wife, my mom, and I have a huge point of contention when it comes to visits. We live about a 7-hour plane ride away from my mom and there hasn't been a single visit in 5 years. My wife and my mom never had a great relationship. It wasn't too terrible but just very different people and they get on each other's nerves, so my wife doesn't want her to stay in the house. It makes me sad but my wife feels the home needs to be a sanctuary and no one who upsets her should be allowed to stay in her sanctuary, and I chose to support that. Her ideal visit would be my mom staying at a hotel and having designated visiting times. My mom says we can make our rules but we can't seriously expect her to put her time and effort into traveling to stay at a hotel. I also understand that train of thought. My wife however thinks my mom owes it to our kids to make the effort. My mom says my wife is selfish for expecting her to sacrifice her time, effort, and peace of mind just to be treated like a burden. I have told my wife to leave it alone. I called my mom recently to talk and my wife came over and began making digs about how the kids don't recognize my mom and were asking if I actually have parents. My mom said my wife needed to leave the conversation or she was going to hang up. My wife said it is so sad that my mom won't just come and see her grandkids because she feels entitled to stay in our house. I just snapped and told my wife that she needs to stop acting entitled to my mom's time, energy, the money it would take to visit, and she is the entitled one. My mom began laughing and my wife looked devastated. I quickly hung up and tried to talk it out with my wife, but she was furious and said I broke a cardinal rule of marriage by calling her out in front of my mom. I do get that but I've given her my opinion in private so many times. Everybody sucks here but your mother may be least. I wouldn't get on a 7-hour plane ride, which is more like 10 hours of travel, all in, just to visit someone who was this hostile to me. And are you paying for the hotel for the week or however long she would be coming? I assume this wouldn't be a weekend, short trip with so much travel involved. Your wife doesn't want her in the house and you agreed to that, so you've both got no leg to stand on complaining about how often she comes to see your kids. You haven't seen your mother in 5 years because these two women in your life just get on each other's nerves. That's not a good enough reason to cause all this grief, but seems like you don't want to stand up to either of them about the conflict. AITA for telling my parents that I refuse to take care of my disabled sister in order to prioritize my own career and hobbies? 35M. My sister Daniela, 33F, has Rett syndrome and will never be able to live independently. Growing up, my parents forced my older brother Henry, 42M, to essentially be a third parent and caretaker for Daniela. Then they expected that of me after Henry moved out when I was 10. I was forced to quit all my extracurriculars. I was never allowed to go anywhere or do anything outside of school hours because they would need someone to complete chores while they were at the hospital with Daniela or look after Daniela while they went out to have fun. It was very common for them to say things like, "You get to see your friends every day at school. We only get to see ours 2 nights a week." They would be out until midnight most times and I would be on my own taking care of Daniela. I moved out the day I graduated high school. I only talk to my parents for family emergencies, because any other conversation becomes about me again becoming a full-time, unpaid caregiver for Daniela. Recently my father experienced a health scare. He is fine, but it made my parents realize that they are getting older and will not be able to take care of Daniela someday. They finally got Daniela on a waiting list for a care home, but it's obviously a very long wait and it's very likely that my parents will either pass away or become unable to care for Daniela before it will be her turn to enter the care home. My parents explained this to me and said how since I have the ability to work from home with my job, I can start taking over certain days with Daniela's care to get back into the hang of it and be ready in case I need to become her full-time caregiver. I explained that I would not work from home, because it makes less money and I want to focus on advancing my career. I also wanted free time for my own hobbies and outside social life. My parents called me selfish and said that I need to realize caring for Daniela will not leave enough time for those other things. I told my parents I would not be caring for Daniela. I've spent my entire childhood taking care of her and I'm done. Now other family members and some acquaintances are telling me what a horrible person I am because I am prioritizing career advancements and hobbies over my own sister. Some are calling my ableist because Daniela's disability isn't fair to her or my parents, and I am essentially saying disabled people shouldn't be accommodated by refusing to help care for Daniela. I believe that disabled people all deserve to have their needs met. At the same time, I'm not obligated to keep putting my life on hold for Daniela and my parents. I know on the outside it sounds horrible to prioritize my career and hobbies over my disabled sister, but I won't return to revolving my life around caring for Daniela because it's never going to stop if I do. AITA? Waiver Support Coordinator in Florida here. If OP lives in the US, each state has their own Medicaid waiver program specifically for people with developmental disabilities. In Florida there is also the long-term care waiver if the disability is not developmental and a traumatic brain injury waiver for those who had something happen after age 18. If OP's sister has an IQ below 70 and at least 3 major life activities she can't perform due to her disability, she can get on the I-Budget DD waiver in Florida. I can only speak for Florida here, every state has their own qualifications. The waiver pays for residential care where OP's sister could live in a group home, much better than a care home, or skilled nursing facility, personal supports to care for her at the family home, etc. 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 OP is NTABTW. These programs are specifically designed to help those with disabilities get the care they need and relieve stress on the family.